artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
Hello, this is episode 309. I continue to craft my parts of these episodes, like this prologue, by hand, using AI just for occasional research. And after the interview you're about to hear, I feel vindicated, not in some kind of Luddite sense that AI is bad, but in the sense that I'm using me for the things that matter. And this matters. Professor Michael Gerlich is back on the show, calling from Zurich, Switzerland. He was on last October, and the reason for getting back to him this rapidly is twofold. Number one, he has a new book out, and number two, he has a new paper out, and the two are related. The book is The Convenience Trap: What Happens When AI Becomes the Mind Behind Our Lives. And it's about the threats to what I call our cognitive autonomy when we use AI the wrong way. And it turns out the ways we tend to use it are mostly the wrong ways, which was what Michael was talking about last October, because he was the author of a widely cited study showing that students' use of AI for cognitive offloading impaired their critical thinking. Translation: using AI to do your homework is bad for learning. But his new research shows that following what he calls the structured prompting protocol of using your brain first, AI second, results in improved learning. Like I said, this matters. Michael is the head of Center for Strategic Corporate Foresight and Sustainability at SBS Swiss Business School. His research and publications largely focus on the societal impact of artificial intelligence. He's also taught at the London School of Economics and Political Science, Cambridge, and other institutions. He's also been an advisor to the President and Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan, the Uzbekistan Cabinet, and Ministers of Economic Affairs in Azerbaijan. We're going to start with a frankly shocking story that shows how dependent students have become on AI, then talk about how to avoid cognitive offloading, how to use AI more effectively, the anchoring effect of AI use, using GPS as an analogy, and the risks of unexamined AI use. So let's get into the interview. Michael Gerlich, thank you for coming back on AI and You. It is a pleasure to have you back again, and so soon, because you have a new book and a new study. We want to talk about both of those. And let's start with your upcoming book, The Convenience Trap: What Happens When AI Becomes the Mind Behind Our Lives, because it opens with this arresting story that I want you to relate to the audience about you witnessing students in an MBA class using ChatGPT to decide what questions to ask. Tell it to us in your own words, please.
Yeah. So first of all, Peter, thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure. Yes, the book is already out, published as well as an ebook and available everywhere. The story you are referring to was really a very shocking experience for me. That's why I actually got it in the book as well. So we had DBA and MBA students all together and had the speaker invited to talk to them. And in the auditorium, I was sitting in one of the higher seats, and just in front of me, a row below, a little bit to the side, was an executive MBA student sitting and was asking ChatGPT when we came to the Q&A, what question to ask. The problem was not just that, but the student, and we talk about someone in their mid-30s to late 30s, asking not only what to ask, but actually asking a question that the speaker just not even 4 minutes ago discussed in depth. I realized that having ChatGPT for the student, it was no longer necessary even to listen. It's not even to think, what could I ask? But it was obviously that the person didn't even listen. So it was so weird for me that I thought, how can that be? This is not a young person who is new with the technology, is insecure, is a person who has a professional life and later in their career does now an executive MBA. So that was a very strange experience, although I have to say, it's not a unique one. So I see more and more that artificial intelligence, what we talk about generative AI, and in specific the large language models, right? You go to ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, are pretty much being used directly as the first contact whenever something is on someone's mind or they have a question, even without thinking about it for themselves, right? And that's why the book is as well named The Convenience Trap, because AI is so convenient for us. It invites us. It tells me, Michael, I can think for you, right? You don't have to. Just ask me, and I give you the full solution. And that is, at the end, it's a trap in which we can easily fall into. It's very difficult to get out.
Well, and I think this example that you related there is so useful for how alarming it is on so many levels. The student, as you said, hadn't been listening, or they wouldn't have relayed a question that had already been answered. But what then was their purpose in asking the question, or in this case, parroting the question that ChatGPT had gave them? What were they looking to get out of this? Now, I assume you're not reading their mind, but what do you believe that means for the future of our attempts to educate MBA students and other students and the way in which they will do their work? Because I'm trying to wrap my mind around why they did that.
Well, I believe that when you are in this environment with your peers and there is a speaker which came from the industry and you have professors sitting in the room as well, you want to show that you participate probably, or that you are engaging, right? That you're not quiet, because obviously that's what we all want. We want that our students engage into discussions and are critical and do not just sit and quietly dream or sleep. I can only assume that might have been the reason, because otherwise, like I said, a mid-30 to end 30 person, why would you ask even then the question? If it's not interesting to you, you don't want to listen, so just sit there. It's all fine, right? So it was really weird. But I can slowly see the longer those large language models are out, that people get so used to it, right? They trust it, they use it more, they offload the thinking process. It's very fast. If you get an acceptable answer, which might be mediocre, but it is acceptable, and that you stop even to start thinking. And this is definitely an extreme example, right? I mean, I assume that other students don't do it in such a way, but it is so inviting that it seems some people might even think, oh, I don't have to listen, I can, and still can pretend at the end of the day that I was an active listener and I can contribute and can engage with the topic. Right.
Right. Well, and one can imagine a future scenario where the lecturer was reading a script that had been prepared by ChatGPT that they hadn't engaged with, and then comes the student asking a question that they haven't thought about either, and the answer is produced the same way, and the appearance externally is of the same form, and yet nothing is happening inside the minds of any of the participants.
Yeah. And this has, on so many levels, as you already said, this impacts us in society, right? So first of all, communication is gone. We are not communicating ourselves anymore, but we let our AI communicate, whether this might be now the lecturer, a teacher, whether this might be the student or in your workplace. I hear more and more that people use generative AI to write their emails even, and not just the difficult ones. I can imagine that you might have never written a condolence letter to someone and you feel awkward and you don't have the right words in such an extreme situation that you might ask the AI what would be a normal letter to do, but a normal conversation. And I have talked to people who are communication specialists and they analyzed this more, how AI is impacting actually communications. And they have a better view than I have, but they are telling me that pretty much communication is breaking down, but it appears that everyone is so refined in their communication. So that happens as well then in the classroom. It happens in the auditorium. So it is the communication that gets impacted, but as well the thinking. And there was this study, I mean, we talked about this the last time as well, it's the so-called Microsoft Carnegie study that were analyzing knowledge workers on cognitive offloading. And they found out that people with a lower self-confidence would use AI more and tend to having more cognitive offloading, but at the same time, an increased self-confidence, meaning becoming overconfident at the end of the day. And that's another problem, right? While we might get a positive feedback because the AI created work sounds nice and is acceptable, maybe mediocre, but it comes very fast. It comes to pretty much any question that you have, that you feel, wow, with that AI, I can do anything, although you pretty much neither have the knowledge. And this is what the MIT study showed when they were measuring the brain waves. It was not so much about the brain waves, but it was when using generative AI, but it was rather that after a few days, the people that used generative AI to write the essay couldn't remember what the content was, while the people who were writing it themselves, they remembered, they could relate back to it, could answer questions. So that shows us as well when we talk about the learning effect from it. Now, it could be, I can't write it, but AI does it. And now I study it. And with that, I learn and actually become better. That study showed that this wasn't the case, right? People, when using generative AI, they are not thinking and not remembering. And that's where the problem is, right? So this is on so many levels a problem. And you're right. If the lecturers use AI, the students use AI, in the end, it's AI talking to AI. But what about the human, right? We always talk about human in the loop. I don't like that because in the loop means that I'm copied in. No. We should be on top of the loop. We should be actually making that decision. And that comes as well with the thinking, right? That we are the ones who have, and this is where you're referring to the other study that was published last October, is about the use of AI, right? So we were testing in 3 scenarios how people respond to the question, what are the advantages of democracy? It was specifically a simple question that in theory everyone can answer. Experts were not allowed to participate, obviously, right? And the first scenario was that the participant alone, without any technical support or devices, should answer the question, which was recorded and was later anonymously scored by a panel of experts. Then we gave the same participant ChatGPT-4. They all got the same version and on the same computer and had to answer the same question, but was now allowed to use ChatGPT-4, right? And we were recording the results and observing whether there's cognitive offloading or not. And then we asked the same question, ChatGPT-4 kind of as a benchmark alone, right? Without any human there. And then we trained the participant on how to avoid the cognitive offloading, which is kind of a reverse prompting to actually elevate their own critical thinking and hopefully have a higher score, have a better result with it. And the results were as expected. Human alone didn't score that high, obviously without any support. Human with AI unguided was a little bit better, but still wasn't really that much better, up to 15% in the scores. And human in control with the support of AI went up to 60% in the scores, up to 60%, depending on the age group and on the people that we had there.
The scores you're talking about, are those the results, how good the result was, or how much they learned?
No, the results. Because it was always this panel of independent experts
assessing,
who anonymously were just scoring results. They didn't know, is it human alone? Is it unguided or guided with AI? So they were just scoring the results. And now let's think. Peter, you are a critical thinker. You're an amazing mind you have right now. We too now sit and we think about what are the advantages of democracy. Now, believe me, if we would do that for a minute or two, we would start talking and thinking, we would realize, stop. Democracy, there's not one democracy. What democracy are we talking about? Are we talking about the American system of democracy? Are we talking about the Swiss system of democracy, the French, the British, right? What kind of democracy? And then what time? Is it today's? Are we talking 50 years ago? What is it? And then the next question should come up is when we ask about advantages. Advantage for whom? For the government? For the individual? For corporations? And we would actually, when you go through that and you start thinking, you realize all those questions. When you ask that question directly to your go-to AI, it will not have the discussion with you. It will give you the best answer, and it will give you the answer that it predicts you would like to hear, because your AI knows you. And it's always trying to predict what you would like to hear. And now you never come to the point that you have this intense discussion and the thinking that democracy is not democracy, and that this goes a lot deeper. But when you think now, we two, sit there, talk, we think, okay, what kind of democracies? Then it might be that, Peter, you sit in the US and you might not be totally familiar how democracy in Switzerland works. You know that the whole population very often is involved in the decision-making in the government. So it seems to be different, right? So you know that it's different, but you don't know in what way. Now, what you can do is you can ask the AI to do the dirty work. You can ask it, can you please give me an example of a different democracy system? And then you can say, for example, Switzerland, without telling what you need the information for. Because as soon as you tell it what it is for, that you're trying to solve this question, it will try to predict what you would like to hear. It would already start influencing you on the answer. And the answer would be influenced. It would be highly biased. But if you use it now as kind of a research tool without telling it what it is for, right? Purely for facts. As you remember, when we were a little bit younger, we are still very, very young, but we had to go to the library and look for books and research in books. And we didn't have the AI that could do the searching for us, or we didn't even have an online catalog in the university library that would search for us, right? And you should do the same thing. But now you use the AI as you would use the university library computer to search for information without telling what it is for, right? And then you can create your own answer first, right? You might have multiple loops. You might identify multiple questions for which you would need more data. But once you have formalized and finalized your own opinion and you think, that's it, it hurts now, and I can't go any further, that's the point where we should then use AI as all the other people normally use it, by telling it, this was the question. This is my answer. Can you please give me opposing opinions? Opposing, that's important. No confirmation bias. You should tell your AI as well, please try not to predict what I like to hear as an answer. Avoid to serve my confirmation bias. So we ask, please give me opposing opinions, and ask, what might I have forgotten? So what did I forget? Right? And now you can start the conversation because you already went through the whole thinking process to your limit. And now the AI can give you new perspectives. It might be able now to give you opposing opinions or arguments that are different from your own. But when you directly go to your generative AI and say, what are the advantages of democracy? It gives you right away a final acceptable answer. Not a very good one, but one that leaves a very good impression with you. And there is no discussion because you got what you wanted. And the issue is, and we have seen that in the study from October as well, that some participants were really extreme critical thinkers, right? I highly respect them. But as soon as we gave them ChatGPT-4, they directly put the question in, right, as they were asked. So cognitive offloading right away. And then we told the participant, look, you had no cognitive offloading. I said, no. And oh, yeah, you're right. But it doesn't matter. Because when I receive the information from the AI, I can critically analyze it and can continue. And this is where we know from psychology what is being called the anchoring effect. That the first information that we get, especially when it is in such a way being presented that it sounds really smart and logical and plausible, that it is so difficult to get out of this first information that you get and create something new. So we have to do that actually before ourselves, because afterwards, if you're not really a specialist in the field, it becomes really difficult to do that due to the anchoring effect, right? And this is where we are saying as well in the book, where at the end we are saying it is not about AI is not the problem. It is rather how we use AI, and that on all levels, from schools to our individual life to on the job, and then later on in society generally. So it's really fascinating. And I have to say I never really liked the expression, not AI is going to take a job, but a human who uses AI is going to take a job. And I'm saying, no, not even that is correct, but it is we replace ourselves if we use AI the wrong way. And that's on the job as well. If I'm just offloading by asking every question that appears on my job to the AI, and all I did in plain English, ask a question, got the answer, and present that as my work, company won't pay you hundreds of thousands or whatever your salary is over a certain period of time. So you would actually, if you don't contribute to the output, right, creates the answer or the solution to the problem, then you replace yourself.
Right.
So while AI is a brilliant tool, you have to make sure that you elevate the whole process. And this is often forgotten. That's what the convenience trap is. If I go the convenient way, then AI can do everything. But then why should anyone pay me when the AI is cheaper and can do the whole thing? Just asking it in plain English, a question or multiple questions. We were talking maybe 2 years ago about prompt engineers, right? And we see that prompting gets easier and easier. At least I'm not talking about research specialists, right, in the pharma industry, health industry, or somewhere in engineering, but I'm talking about the co-pilot, which is ChatGPT, that is on everyone's computer nowadays in the offices, right? And the interaction with co-pilot in your work, where a company is saying, just use it. And this is where we would replace ourselves if we're not using it in the right way.
Thank you for giving us such a complete tour of the topic there. You've taken us all the way through the valley of despair, up a mountain of hope at the other side, and then returned to some of the things that we need to be vigilant about in other contexts. I want to retrace those steps now and explore some of the sidetracks from some of those places. And you were talking about the different ways in which the use of AI can, if I could summarize, that a student performing an assignment with AI could produce a better result, but have less learning. And that clearly violates the point of the student being in school, because they're there to learn. In other contexts, outside of school, learning is not the objective. Getting a result is the objective. A business doesn't care how the result is produced. They just want it done regardless of who or what produces it. That will lead to a discussion about the role of humans in producing that result, because as you were saying there, if they just end up being the interface to AI, that's not worth paying much for. But to take us a counterpoint, for instance, let's explore this. If I think about my use of my car's GPS, which is a smart way of telling me how to get from where I am to where I want to go, I used to do that before the GPS with other means. Use a map or use my memory. Now I use the GPS in every situation, even ones that I've been over 100 times, because might be a better way of doing it this time. there are at least 6 different ways for me to get from here to downtown. And AI has, in the form of the GPS, has taken me through each one of those at different times, depending on the traffic conditions. And when I use the GPS, I don't have to think about when to turn. I don't have to think about what the traffic might be at this time. I don't have to think about any of those things. I can think about something else. I can listen to a podcast, for instance. I can engage with that a lot more fully than if I'm thinking about, I've got to make sure I get my turn. I've got to think about, are they still tearing up that road there, and all of those things. And someone might say, but Peter, your spatial awareness is atrophying. And my response is, I don't care. This is a good trade-off for me. You may not feel that's a representative example of the kind of Faustian bargain that we're making, but expand on or look at that as an example that perhaps defines some of the boundaries of what you're talking about.
Okay. So first of all, I agree with you. I use navigation system as well, but unfortunately, I have to admit as well, it got me sometimes stuck. And I remember I had a car rental in Turkey and wanted to go from Antalya to Istanbul. And in one point, it led me somewhere high in the mountains. And then it said, I'm in the sea. And I was in the middle of Turkey, didn't know where I am, what to do, didn't have a map. It was quite disastrous. And sometimes we hear as well, when people outside of an airport end up like 100 cars somewhere in the field, because Google Maps had a mistake in it and everyone went there. So that's fine. These are the negative sides. No, I agree. That is a good trade-off. But that's not your whole life. That's not all your job. This is when you go from A to B. And what would be interesting is that you were describing that you're always going the same way, but now it offers me 10 different ways. So I'm not using it for ways that I know. I use it when I don't know the way or when I'm unsure. So there might be a different use how I use it. So I don't have permanently the nice lady talking while I'm driving, do this, do that, no, do. So might be. But when we talk about cognitive offloading, and I think we had the discussion as well in the last podcast, usually the term has been defined by offloading information, meaning data. That was typically when we were writing information into books, or when we were young and we left the house, there were no mobile phones, right? So when we had to call home, we had to remember at least our home number, the phone numbers of our friends and family members. Today, everything is in the mobile phone. I don't have to remember that. That's okay. That's offloading of data, and I can access that. And your navigation system, that's now the next level. That's not data anymore, just, right? It's a little bit like you were describing. I don't have to think anymore. Could there be traffic, or that route may be faster when I take a highway or not? So the system does it for you, and it has its advantages. The problem is not that you use it every now and then. And the problem is not that you use a calculator that does now the calculation for you. That's not the problem. The problem with artificial intelligence, large language models that we have, is that it's actually working in all situations of your life. In the morning when you get up, now you have it even in your search engine. The first information that you get is already the AI answer. Whatever question you have, you would like to plan a trip, ask here you want to go to a restaurant, ask your AI. On the job, you can ask any question that you have. It's pretty much offering you the convenience of, I can answer everything. I can do everything for you. And this is where the problem is, right? No one says, okay, you would use AI for, a few specific things a little bit. I believe, we don't know, we don't have long-term studies, but we believe that has no impact on your thinking. When we talk young people, that's different because the critical thinking has to get developed, and as well the love for critical thinking, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you that, but that's such an enjoyment when you can actually dive deep and go into deep discussions around the topic, get impact and challenge from different areas. Young people haven't that experience. For them, it is just torture. I have to learn, I have to remember, thinking is difficult. And if you use their AI in the wrong way, or too long permanently with everything, with your homework, your whatever question comes up in your school, in your university, in your private life. And I'm always asking when, for example, I give executive education courses, I'm always asking people, who use generative AI? Obviously, everyone does it now, use it. And then I'm asking, what do you use it for? And believe it or not, more and more I get the answer for everything. When I heard it the first time, I couldn't believe it. And I had to ask, what do you mean by for everything? And I said, well, I use it for in my private life for whatever question I have and on the job as well. And I thought, well, this can't be, right? I mean, this was so strange to me. But more and more people do it. And this makes sense. This is what we call the AI trust spiral as well. When you have a positive experience with AI, maybe because you got very efficient, a problem being solved on the job, you got a positive feedback from your boss or from your teacher or from your professor, this was really good, or you pretend to sit in an auditorium and to listen, and now you think you ask a smart question and everyone's, wow, but actually you are not. And that's where the problem starts with cognitive offloading. It is not that we have it in one part. It is if we get so much used to it, we trust, we offload, the more we trust, the more we use. And with that in the AI trust spiral, at the end of the day, actually, we are still having the agency. We are still legally making the decision at the end of the day, whether we use the result that AI presents us. But the more we do and the more we trust, the less likely we are going to be critical, especially not as we are in an environment, in a society that efficiency is being rewarded. Everyone pushes for a fast answer. We need everything fast and has come right now. Nobody gives you the time to think about it. And when we have that, then cognitive offloading or the use of AI, then it becomes a problem. You using your GPS, I don't see a problem in that. Not at all.
And that's the end of the first half of the interview. Next half, next week. Lots of people are telling me how much value they're getting from these shows. But the number of people who could be doing that is almost infinitely higher. They just don't know about the show. The way they'll find out is by you giving us a top rating. A nice review is even better. That's just how the game is played. I don't like it, but that's what we've got. In today's news, ripped from the headlines about AI and right on point with today's interview, you've heard me mention Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 thinking on the show a lot. System 1 is fast and intuitive. System 2 is slow and analytical. Well, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania argue that AI has added a third category that they call artificial cognition, in which decisions are driven by, quote, external, automated, data-driven reasoning originating from algorithmic systems rather than the human mind, end quote. Their paper is called Thinking, Fast, Slow, and Artificial, How AI is Reshaping Human Reasoning and the Rise of Cognitive Surrender. And you may recognize that it mirrors Kahneman's book title. They argue that AI systems have given rise to a categorically different form of cognitive surrender, in which users provide minimal internal engagement and accept an AI's reasoning wholesale without oversight or verification. This, quote, uncritical abdication of reasoning itself is particularly common when an LLM's output is delivered fluently, confidently, or with minimal friction, which we know they like to do. As I said, right on point with today's interview. Speaking of which, next week I'll finish the interview with Michael when we'll talk about conducting as a metaphor for directing our thinking, AI's effects on group collaboration, the effects on humans who are reduced to being monitors of AI, the mental models schools have of AI, possible controls on children using AI, and how AI companies might improve their products to help with the problems we're talking about. That's next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You, and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyou.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.